Hello and welcome. It's Thursday. You're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Listen, it's a weird world out there right now. There is a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of stuff that has you sitting back scratching your head. Are we coming into the end times? We've got raging wildfires around the United States. We've got Category 5 hurricanes pummeling the United States and soaking Texas, soaking the East Coast. There's a lot of strange changes that have been going on, and I'm going through my emails, as I always do, looking for interesting guests to bring to you, and one jumps to mind because I got this email about a month ago, and we've had this gentleman on in the past. He's always great to visit with, but these are the points he wanted to talk to me about: the ominous Great American Solar Eclipse, the upcoming astrology that may bring unprecedented weather and earth changes. Those were just the first couple that jumped out at me. The lead up to a transformed world by the end of 2020, the inevitability of the surveillance state and war with our enemies or ourselves. These are all topics that are hot topics going on right now. And especially with this weather situation, I figured, well, if we want answers, we got to go to a guy who knows what he's doing. He's well respected in the field. Jeff Harman is back with us. He has 40 years experience as an astrologer. He also owns a production company. Many of his clients are celebrities, including actors, pop stars, authors, fashion designers, and restaurant owners. He also has clients in special ops, the Federal Reserve, and other very interesting careers around the world. He's back with us again tonight as we talk about what is going on in the world around us. He is a master astrologer. It's great to have you back with us, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, Dave.
When you did your charts at the beginning of the year, and maybe I'm assuming you do that, but most astrologers I know kind of set that in at the beginning of the year to get a feel for what's coming. Do you sit down, do you map out a year, 5 years, 10 years, kind of like a goal plan to see what our planet and our lives are going to look like into the future?
Yeah, there's a method that I got exposed to a long time ago, because that's always an enigma astrologers have to play with, is quote-unquote predicting the future. And I don't even like that term, because I look at it more as energy coming at us. And it's what we do with that energy that really equals the future outcome. And one of the things that I got exposed to years ago was something the Egyptians are purported to have brought to the scene right around 300 BC, and that's speculative, but that's the best the scholars can guess right now. And it's called the Great Conjunctions, and it actually mentions the biblical floods in there, or the flood, and it mentions other apocalyptic events throughout history. And what it does is it uses Jupiter and Saturn. Now, most astrologers listening to me would go, well, that happens every 20 years. And they're right, it does. I mean, Jupiter and Saturn align every 20 years approximately. But this book specifically talked about the way to see cycles in civilization and future events, and I do believe Nostradamus was using this as well as other divinational techniques. The way Nostradamus writes smacks exactly of time points like this. So what it does is it looks at what they call the Great Conjunctions. Every 1,000 years, approximately, Jupiter and Saturn conjoin in the first early degrees of Aries. And then, without getting into all the mechanics, every 240 years, it goes through major changes in what we call elements, like earth, air, fire, and water. So I looked at these a number of years ago, and I said, there's something to this. And the last great conjunction was in 1702, which was the commencement of the Industrial Revolution. Now, many people will go, well, wait a minute, nothing happened in 1702. Actually, it did. Think about it. Benjamin Franklin, mass production came in shortly thereafter. It's purported steam was invented or perfected right around that time. And then, of course, we didn't see steam engines really on train tracks until the late 1700s, I think it was, and don't quote me on that. Anyone can look up that stuff on the internet. But that's about the time steam came in. Electricity was being reviewed as a potential energy that was harnessable. And, of course, Benjamin Franklin was an avid astrologer. A lot of people don't know that. He was deeply steeped in Masonry, as were almost all the founding fathers, and astrology, I might add. So they were using these, and that's what I was doing here. My wife actually is the one who wrote up this radio outline that you were talking about earlier with these points, the ominous Great Solar Eclipse we just had, the American Solar Eclipse. It just came by literally here on August 21st. So, and everybody witnessed that. I had tons of clients calling me and saying, geez, Jeff, I'm going to take a trip up to Oregon or wherever they were going to see the eclipse, and they wanted to know, how it affected their charts. And I have to say, these things in that book, which talk about cycles, are amazing. So to answer your question in a simple way, this is a handful of techniques that astrologers use. One is the great conjunctions. We have the next great conjunction. It's actually called a mutation conjunction coming up in 2020. And that's why I had said, I think the world's going to really be transformed by then. And then also, as you had mentioned, you take every spring equinox is considered the beginning of the year. And you cast a chart when the sun ingresses in a tropical zodiac into the first degree of Aries, or first minute and second of Aries, and that gives you an outlook for what the whole year looks like. And then you do that at the solstices and the fall equinox as well. In other words, the spring equinox, summer solstice, fall equinox, and winter solstice. And this year, I have to say, the winter solstice really looks ominous. That one is the one that looks a little bit more intense, I got to say, that one. The fall equinox, the one that's coming up right now, is even though we have a lot going on, and you mentioned the wildfires, that's the eclipse.
Now, what do you mean that's the eclipse?
Well, the eclipse, those wildfires broke out, and we have wildfires in the West all the time, but I think these are a bit unprecedented, and the two hurricanes, the one that just happened down in
Harvey, right, down in Texas.
Harvey, right. And then Irma right now. We've got, I've got clients and relatives in Florida, and I can tell you that thing is powerful. These all precipitated, the eclipse happened on the 21st, but Mars just conjuncted the eclipse point. And that's why I knew this eclipse, not only was it a total eclipse, but I knew it was going to have a big impact on us, and I think it's going to continue to have an impact on us for the next couple of years.
Can you explain that to the layperson here? I know it's second nature, and it's easy to just understand. But how is it that the moon passing in front of the sun, casting a shadow on the planet or part of it for a short period of time, has an effect on our day-to-day lives and the things that are coming our way?
You know what? You sound just like me in 1975 when my mother first exposed me to astrology. I looked at her and I says, how the heck can any of this stuff have any effect at all? And I really was skeptical of astrology, and the only reason I kept pursuing it was how accurate she was. And then the more I looked into it, I got deeper into not just astrology, but the whole spiritual side. And believe it or not, a lot of research into biblical texts that are directly correspondent. And it's always been known that, in fact, many references in the Bible refer to certain alignments in the sky. And a lot of people don't believe that, but if you ever want to read something, read Stowe's Bible astrology sometime. That's just one of many that's amazing. But it was always believed that the planets don't affect us gravitationally, even though I'm sure that they do. But they're more looking at these alignments on a much different dimension. In fact, it really gets into angels and spiritual energy. Now, many people these days are looking at frequencies of planets and alignments, but I don't know if you felt anything on that eclipse I'm always skeptical of astrology because I'm always like, okay, I'm always like, I want to see it do what I think it's going to do.
Wait a minute. And Master astrologer Jeff Harman is skeptical of astrology?
I am. I always like to put things to the acid test. You have to remember, in the 80s, I was teaching physics class at a college in acoustics, and, I like math. I like to see things work scientifically, and I used to do forensics work, and I have great respect for science. But astrology gets ridiculed often as not being a science. And I also have to say, a lot of modern astrology, not all of it, but some of it, gives astrology a bad name because it doesn't use the techniques that ancient astrology does use. Ancient astrology prior to the 1700s was astronomy scientifically applied. And that's why when you get back to your question on eclipses, I really felt that eclipse. I mean, it was heavy. Not only does the sky darken, and of course where I was in Los Angeles, we're up here by Calabasas, which is not too far from Malibu, if someone doesn't know where Calabasas is. So we weren't in a complete eclipse here. You had to be in the northern portion of the United States or down through the central, through South Carolina, in order to see a full alignment of the sun and the moon. But mathematically, if you look at what happens, they're very rare, and that was a very powerful and long eclipse. That was a long alignment right over the. See, eclipses can only happen when the sun and the moon and the earth are at exactly the same latitude.
Right.
They call it declination in astrology. You can't get it any other way. And you can also have the same thing happen on a full moon eclipse. That was a new moon eclipse. So, but they have an energy, and the Chaldeans.
Well, now when you say they have an energy,
they do.
We can measure the energy of radiation and electricity and steam. Can we measure astrological energy?
No, not empirically, not the way you're talking about. And,
okay.
Like I mentioned a minute ago, we all want to stick a meter into something. That gets into the same thing with healing. Who was it? Dr. Claude Swanson, who's a very good friend of mine. I like Claude a lot. He is doing some wonderful work. He wrote The Synchronized Universe, and he just wrote a new book, which I should remember because he signed it for me. But he is a very accomplished physicist, and he has gone to great lengths to look into paranormal phenomena, whether it be astrology, whether it would be healing, Reiki, Qigong, ghosts, all this type of stuff. We don't have the technology to directly measure, even though we see a lot of TV shows where they're trying to get voices, and sometimes they do, or we get temperature variations. But those things often don't cross into the three-dimensional five-sense world. It's like if you talk to most people about a soul, they'll look at you with a blank stare. Not all, but some people will. They don't believe in souls. Well, prove it to me. And, science has tried to weigh a body just alive and just dead, and they can't tell the much difference. I think they found some minute difference, but who knows? Maybe it was the scale. So astrology has always been an area where you can apply hard science to it. But, it's like with Trump's election, I was probably as personally doubtful as you were when we were on the radio about a year ago.
Right.
When I looked at my logical left reasoning reductionary mind and said, is Trump going to win? Not a chance. When I looked at the astrology, I said, he's got it, hands down. Slam dunk, this guy's got it.
And he did. He stated that on our show last year, folks, on Darkness Radio. He made the claim. He was one of the first ones to make the positive claim. Yeah, it's a slam dunk. He's got this. And we were all rolling our eyes in studio thinking there's no way this is going to happen. And
I thought you were going to hang up the phone on me.
Jeff nailed it and knew that it would be a resounding type of change. So, I mean, see, that aspect is fascinating to me. And I'm getting a strange echo. I don't know if you've got headphones up or speaker up a little loud, but I'm catching my voice come back at me.
I'm on a regular phone here. So
okay.
Not clear as a bell here.
All right, I'll back down my microphone.
This is an enigma. This is you talk to people about angels and ghosts. Like, here's a great example. I do clearings sometimes for properties, or I'll analyze people who own apartments or homes or whatever it is, and they'll tell me that they have strange paranormal phenomena going on, whatever it might be. And I will look at the astrology, and the astrology will say whether it is or isn't, and it's invariably always right. The fourth house in a chart, when you cast a chart, represents real estates and property. And for anybody listening, if anyone's seen an astrological chart, there's 12 what we call terrestrial divisions. And the easiest ones to know is every day we have sunrise, every day we have noon, and every day we have sunset, and every night we have midnight. And those are the four what we call quadrants, and then they divide 3 divisions in each one of those quadrants, which equals 12. And each of those areas rules a specific area of life. And long story short, that's how you can determine many things from what I call interrogation astrology. Interrogation astrology doesn't even require a birth chart. You're not looking at Dave Schrader's birth chart or my birth chart or anyone else's. You're looking specifically at a question, which is consciousness. And Claude Swanson and I, Dr. Claude Swanson and I, were looking into this. He said, how can this possibly work? I said, I know. That's what I said, too. But if you go back to antiquity, kings and queens, generals, emperors, including George Washington. In fact, I have statements that were published by Benjamin Franklin. He said no general, no emperor, no leader would commence an act of war or of coronation or dropping the cornerstone of a building without first consulting an astrologer. Now, today, that's long gone. But and you say, well, how can these things work? They do, and that's the only reason I keep doing this, is because the more I study the ancient techniques, which basically came up out of Egypt, Greece, and I'd also have to highly credit India and the Vedantic path. Stuff's amazing. You can't make it up. In fact, if they rewrote history and looked at how much was shaped through court astrologers advising emperors, we could probably rewrite it a bit. Galileo was an astrologer, even though they'll never admit that in the textbooks. He was an astrologer. So was Newton. All these people, they were scientists, and today's hard left-brain science will omit that. But if you go back and do the research, he was definitely into astrology. So was C.S. Lewis and so many others. But not to stray off the track, that's why this eclipse, going back to the Chaldeans logged. They talk about this. This is people without computers, slide rules, or sophisticated math knew that all these eclipses that happen are a series of eclipses that start at the North and South Pole. And particularly the one we just had began in 1639, and it began at the North Pole, and it will serpentine around and have more eclipses as time goes on, and it ends in 2883. So that means the world still has to be here. Not going to end. Got to finish that eclipse.
All right, we're back. Now, Jeff, one thing I'm curious about, okay, we just talked a little bit about the solar eclipse and that will have an effect on us and the energies around us. What about the fact that yesterday, on Wednesday, the news came out, the sun is having an explosive day. On the morning of the 6th of September, an active region of the sun belched out 2 huge streams of radiation. One of them was the largest such flare in over a decade. These 2 flares were both placed in the X class, the most powerful type of solar flare. The larger of the 2 was classified as an X9.3, the strongest since an X17 flare back in 2005. X-class solar flares are the largest explosions in the solar system, often accompanied by twisting ropes of plasma 10 times the size of Earth that curl up off the sun's surface. And these solar flares were aimed directly at planet Earth. Does solar flares and radiation explosions like that, I know that we can be affected by them on our planet just from the radiation bursts, but do those play any kind of effect into changing some of the astrology charts? You know, you talked about how it's an energy. When you're having explosive moments of energy like these solar flares, will that sometimes change the predictability or the understanding of what we thought might be coming or happening?
That's a good question. That I really can't answer. There's no ancient data that would factor in solar flares into astrology that I've seen. But my personal feeling is absolutely they have a huge effect, and I think that's why we're seeing the weather we're seeing right now. The other thing that may be contributing to this astrologically, I'd kind of look at it the other way around. And this is an interesting observation. Right now, we have kind of an eerie similar alignment that went on in 1934, and it's many astrologers will know this by the Jupiter-Uranus opposition. This actually happened in 1934, right when Hitler and the whole Reichstag and all that, and the Great Purge and Mussolini's radical purity laws, all this stuff was coming in at that time. It was a very radical time, and of course that was the rise of Hitler and communism. And we have that same thing going on right now. In fact, it's been kind of going on ever since the end of last year, December of last year. So we see it in the United States with the dissension, and we really do still have a divided country with Donald Trump. We have the never-Trumpers, and we have the pro-Trumpers, and then we have the people in the middle. I've received hate mail from people just because I said anything positive about Donald Trump's chart. And I was never endorsing him or not endorsing him. I just stated what the astrology said. So we see this really peaking right now, very similar to what had happened in the early 30s. And it's the same energy. Now, these energies also, too, happen approximately every 12 years, but I think what's making this so strong is what I'd mentioned earlier. In 2020, we have something, again, that has not happened since 1702. And 1702 was a great conjunction that ushered in the Industrial Revolution. And a lot of people will say, yes, but nothing happened right there, like I said. But if you look at what had happened to this world from the 1700s to now, it's been colossal. Never have we seen this kind of a rapid, amazing change. And I think we're about to see the same thing from 2020 forward. And it's ironically exactly on the winter solstice of 2020, which is September 21 of 2020, that is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. I'm just looking at my notes here. Yep. And I got to tell you, that one I think ushers in the Roaring 20s. What's kind of scary is we sit back here at 2017 with weather patterns that are very powerful right now. And we've got North Korea. We've got a lot more than that is going on. North Korea, and I don't want to minimize him, but I don't think he's the major threat. I think the major threat is more what's happening with Iran and Israel. And it's not transparent in the news right now. But I really believe the petrodollar situation and the tensions between Russia, who will back Iran and is backing Iran, and China's more sitting in the middle right now. But I really think that's more the threat, and that could rear its head on the next, what we call Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which happens, let me look at my notes so I'm correct here, it's right around January, right before this other conjunction I was talking about, this what we call Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. There's a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So this is very powerful to have these three lining up like this, and I think that's why this is such an unprecedented time. And I would point it out this way.
Are you talking about like apocalyptic kind of situations rising, or are you just talking about a major changeover of power?
Well, I'm talking about two things. And that's good. Thank you for clarifying that, because we got two major cycles here. One is the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, which hasn't happened like this one for 240 years. It begins what we call a new elemental triplicity cycle for another 240 years. And on that note, I might also add the Hebrew calendar runs out just about on the next one, and I think that's when we're going to see catastrophic, potential destructive forces in the world. 2012, everyone thought the world was going to end, the Mayan calendar. I couldn't find a thing. And everyone was buying food, ammunition, and waiting for the end, and I just shook my head and said, I can't find a thing. I can't come up with anything. This one that we have coming up in the end of 2020, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, huge new change in society, and I think we're going to see a camera up every orifice on this world. We are going to see technology explode. I really think in the next 20 years, flying cars will become a reality. Genetics are going to explode. We will see robotics off the charts, almost Terminator-like type stuff, in terms of technological capabilities. I think new fuel systems are going to be coming in. That's what this astrology indicates. But the apocalyptic stuff, or I would put it more in these terms, the challenge is the next 2.5 years. That's the challenge, because this Saturn-Pluto conjunction happens right before this new era change, and that's what I believe could really bring some major trouble. And that could be in the Middle East. That's what it looks like to me.
Do you get more specifics on that? And if the charts are telling you one thing like that, can energy be changed? And I'm giving you an out here. I guess my listeners are going to egg me on my way home by saying, yeah, can the energy change? But if we know that we're going down a dark corridor, is there a way to flip that light on, or is it already kind of written?
Well, it may be both. And that's where I love studying the ancient Vedantic texts. It talks about several divisions of karma, and karma is always kind of I think George Harrison was the one who popularized that, and so did Yogi Bhajan and other people here in the West in the 60s and 70s. But karma is kind of a foreign word to us Westerners, because we look at, we call them sins, right? Sins of the past, where karma in the ancient Vedantic texts, like the Upanishads particularly, and Jyotisha, which is what Vedic astrology is truly called. Jyotisha means the science of the light of the soul. And that is a science I just love, because it really treats us all as souls having physical experiences, rather than what Western astrology does, runs around and says, you're a Libra or a Aries or whatever else they say. They say, no, the angels waited for your soul to enter the body at first breath for the appropriate alignment. And I always say, forget Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus. This is the real matrix. So to your question, it's saying, yes, certain karmas have to play out. They are unstoppable. It's like a Mack truck doing 80 miles an hour towards an intersection. It ain't going to stop unless you hit the brakes really, really hard. But can you hit the brakes? The answer seems to be yes, but you may not be able to prevent it fully from happening. You just may be able to alter the way it ends up. It's like vectors. If you've ever studied vectors in science, they're just forces acting upon a body. And that body will continue in that motion until something else either stops it through friction or another force acts upon it. And that's kind of how this stuff is more viewed.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get the gist of it. But before we go to the break, let me ask you this right now because it's on the mind of everybody. We've had massive storms build up before, and by the time they get inland, they've petered out. What are the charts telling you about this Hurricane Irma that's about to strike? Is this going to be a full effect, massive storm? Do you feel it's going to be worse, or is it going to deflect and weaken?
Well, that's a good question because I haven't looked at that. But why don't you take a break and let me see if I can come up with something between now and the time you're done with the break.
Great. Why don't we do that? We'll take a break. We've got more coming your way. This is the best in paranormal talk radio. And if people are interested in getting more information from you, Jeff, and getting charts, what's the best way to contact you?
Jeff at jeffharman.com, and that's HARMAN.com, not O-N. So that's usually the best way.
We'll have a link up to that. You can follow up with our guest as well. We'll cover that and so much more. What does the world have in store for us, and what do the stars tell us? We'll find out when we return to Beyond the Darkness.
Beyond the Darkness.
Master astrologer Jeff Harman, my guest here on the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. What do the stars tell us? Star Wars, bad weather, more dangers we need to know, and our guest is here to talk to us about it. Now, before the break, I asked what you might be able to tell from the stars and astrology about this storm that's coming. We've heard, many different storms have really gained strength and then petered out by the time they got in and were nowhere near as powerful as they appeared to be. What are you picking up? Is this just the start of something worse, or is this going to, are we going to just catch a glancing blow?
I think the national weather is pretty right on this one. I think it's going to come in pretty much how they're saying it's going to come in, and it's going to be pretty damn strong. I think it's going to hit Miami. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it grazes. And, I am a firm believer, and here's an experiment we could all do. If people meditated enough, I really believe you could push that storm in a different direction. Now, a weather person's going to tell you that, the lows and the highs are what's going to direct it, and the jet stream was the big thing they're paying attention to. I think, and I hope I'm wrong, but it looks like it's going to clobber Miami pretty heavy duty, and Boca Raton, and slide off possibly a little bit. It's going to dust off the eastern coast. I think it's going to really do some damage in Florida.
It's interesting. We actually posted today an intention experiment, and I'll ask my audience to do that again now if you didn't get a chance to see it on social media. Just take a few moments, even if it's right at the end of this episode. Just take a few moments, even open up a screen, take a look at the photo of that hurricane and the area it's coming to, and just envision that breaking up. Envision the clouds dissipating, or envision it blowing off back into the ocean and doing very minimal damage. If there's enough of us, and we've done some strange intention on our show in the past when they were dealing with wildfires in Colorado and drought, and California even. I think it was a year or two ago when you guys were really having it, and all of a sudden we had all of our listeners say, can we do an intention experiment? We did it, and you guys started getting record rainfalls, which hadn't happened in years.
I really believe we are creators in creation. This is exactly what that's wonderful you guys did that, because I believe this hurricane could be redirected. If we pushed hard enough, I really think it can be. So far, the reading I'm getting is coming right in, just like they say it is. So let's do that. Let's do an intention. We have time. We certainly have time. They say it's not going to hit there until Saturday, and let's try and make that happen. Dr. Gary Schwartz in Tucson, Arizona, who I know and I enjoy very much, has done many experiments, and so did Dr. Claude Swanson. I've done many experiments that I can't validate like they did because they do it under scientific testing. But healing really works. Prayer really works. This is the whole premise behind this, and this is why I don't consider myself an astrologer. My wife always puts this master astrologer stuff in there, but I consider myself much more of a spiritual consultant, trying to help people, and that's what keeps me wanting to do astrology. I have a lot of people in psychology and business people and everyday people who have these cycles going on that are very severe on them, and I know I have them myself, and I see how powerful it is. Even my son, he's got a very challenging transit, but what changes it is intention and what I would also say conscious self-awareness. That is the most powerful thing in the universe. In fact, astrology is way, way, way down the creative ladder from creation. And there's a model I love in the ancient Kabbalah, and that is God is above all things, unknowable. We can't figure it out because it's beyond our three-dimensional five-sense perception of reality. Then there's the seraphims, cherubims, and the thrones. They say the souls are created way up there. This is so far above any rotating galaxies, amino acids, anything we can think of. It's way, 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 way above that. Then, in fact, there's 49 dimensions they claim in that alone. Then there's the next dimension down, which is the dominance, virtues, and powers. And that is, again, above anything in what we would call the firmaments, galaxies, stars, planets, or the atomic world, if you want, or some atomic world. Then you start getting down into the third hierarchy, and in Hebrew and Aramaic, that's called Yetzirah, which means formation. It's way, way, way down, hundreds of dimensions down, that now you're getting into the rotating galaxies that the Hubble's picking up, and all this stuff science sees, the subatomic worlds, and on and on and on. And this is known as the astral dimension, or the dimension of Yetzirah, the formation. And this is where we start seeing the familiar archangels, angels, spirits, intelligences. This is where the ghosts, the entities, the elementals, all this stuff resides in these 49 dimensions. And then there's the lowest dimension, which is physicality, which is where we're at. And there's many places, I believe, like planet Earth. There's not just Earth. And, we've yet to have hard science validate that. But my opinion is the ancient scriptures say there are, especially in the Vedantic stuff, that there are many worlds like this. And I'm personally a fan that I think there was another world like this one in between Jupiter and Mars, and the asteroid belt is the remnants of that, and this whole dimension shifted and Earth was put here. The moon is a satellite. The moon is very mysterious. Anyone studying paranormal phenomena will find out quite quickly the moon is an enigma. It faces us, just like Pink Floyd said, all the time, one side. It reverberates, as NASA bounces rocket fuselages off of it, and there's some pretty interesting stuff going on with the moon. And not to get into all that, but it is central to astrology, and astrology was communicated down through what they called the rishis, which were the seers. They actually had communication with the angels. Now, some folks say they're extraterrestrials. Maybe it was both. Clearly, many of the rabbinical texts, which is rich with details about this kind of stuff, they were some of the best astrologers, alchemists, and healers. And they were very, very close to the vest about this stuff. It was considered a sacred science, and it is. That's what I'm attracted to. And, just like when you were on the break, and I was just trying to surmise what the chart indicated, astrology is an all-wise, all-tricky oracle. And I've been doing this a long time, but I'm humbled consistently by it. How complex it is, because it is using geometry and astronomy, latitudes, longitudes, and all kinds of other things in the ancient techniques. And again, the modern astrology does not do it the same.
Well, are you seeing, I was going to just ask real quickly before we go off too much further, do you see any more cataclysmic weather that might come across the United States or other parts of the planet?
I think over the next couple of years, we're going to definitely see that. Now, specifically, I haven't looked into when that is, but Mars will make aspects to this eclipse point, and so will Saturn. Those are the trigger points. Now, I haven't had a chance to map those out yet. I've been extremely busy with clients and doing other things and reading, so I don't dedicate a full time to researching this stuff. I personally think the eclipse, well, I can tell you these wildfires in the west and this last hurricane, Irma, all ignited right when Mars conjuncted the eclipse points, or the point. And just if anybody doesn't know what that means, transiting Mars in the sky was moving towards the 0 degree point of the eclipse. That's a trigger point. And what is normally done in the ancient techniques is you freeze the eclipse as like a birth chart, and you look at when aspects happen to that. Now, the next one that comes in is when Mars squares that eclipse point, which is going to be right around the end of December, beginning of January.
And
that's another point.
That's another point that you think we're going to see something. Because I know when you say, over the next few years we're going to see some other, well, we have cataclysmic weather hits the planet every year. So to know that. But I'm just curious, why not, and I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here, Jeff, but if you can kind of get an idea by looking at it and mapping it out, why not do that and then can combine forces with some of these weather outlets to give them an idea? Hey, I really think this is something that we need to start watching for, so maybe the predictability of it will become easier. We can figure out what to do or how to, respond to it because we'll already know it's coming much sooner than is expected.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that happens. I don't know that they would listen to me. I work with people in remote viewing. I've had a lot of research where I've been hired to do that. Why are they hitting their targets at certain times when they're not? I've had law enforcement only because they were looking for anything they could find to help them get clues or on missing people. We call that forensics astrology, where you can look at stuff like that. But that's more, rather than me plotting out when this eclipse point has tough times to it, I don't think the weather channel or the meteorologists would be interested in that.
Is there a point? Is there a point you see coming up where war is in the offing? What I'm saying?
That's the one I'm talking about. That's the 2000. It actually happens in the spring of 2019 looks like the year. 2019. In right around March through June, we have a really tenuous time in there, and then the exact conjunction of the Saturn-Pluto is on January 11th of 2020. Those are two very strong trigger points, and let me tell you why. 9/11 happened exactly on the Saturn-Pluto opposition. The square brought us the crash of the banks in 2008 and 2009. And this one is the conjunction coming up right at the beginning of 2020. So to be clear, because I know this is a bit confusing listening to this, we have a pretty fascist, intense energy that can create a lot of calamity in the world. This could mean war. This could mean some real fascist stuff going on with totalitarianism regimes like communism, Russia, the caliphate stuff going on in Iran and Israel. That's more what I see really rearing its head. The media tends to focus on whatever is happening right now, and then something new will pop up. Well, the astrology indicates that the year 2019 is very, very precarious, and I think it's going to increasingly get that way. This is very dangerous, what happened with Russia. And I've said this for years, the petrodollar system, as we currently have it, where the Federal Reserve basically sets the whole policy here for the United States and all the banking. But the IMF is inextricably tied into that because the petrodollar is the reserve currency for the world. China and Russia especially Russia, have been long looking at a way to get off that standard or break that standard. Now you're not dealing with just the United States. Now you're dealing with what George Carlin called the owners, the guys who really run this place. And they are not in this country or any other country. They're the bankers that supply the Fed, that run the system, and all the European banks in the West here that float this whole crap game. And everyone knows that they're printing bonds out the front door and buying them in the back, and thank God that they do, because you and I wouldn't probably live the way we live if they didn't do what they did and maintain it. And they're not going to let this system crash. And if Russia seeks to break it, China, and this is why there's so much animosity to the United States, is because the United States is the clearinghouse. We're the ones who have the Federal Reserve, which, by the way, isn't any more federal than Federal Express. And it's pretty much that dispensary of capital and control of capital, as well as the Western European banks, that this whole system runs on. And there's more where I see this really coming to a head. And I think it would stay more conventional than nuclear.
And do you see this being a world at war, or is this going to be, just a few
I think
a few
we've
countries?
been at war. I think we've been at war. A lot of people don't know this. You may know this, but that ship that was our destroyer that was collided with, remember, from that tanker ship?
Right.
Or was it a cargo ship? That was a EMP test that I heard happened. And what happened is they disabled that ship, and then they ran into it trying to sink it. And if you look at the course, there's some good stuff on the internet, and I looked into the astrology on that, and I get that that's probably exactly what happened. There's a lot of warfare already going on. China doesn't like us in the South Pacific. This whole situation with North Korea is very, very tenuous, though I don't think that guy is stupid enough to attack one of our satellites or Japan or our country. And if he is, I think he'll get taken out extremely fast and effectively. But it would be a mess. I still say I think Russia working through Iran and doing whatever dissension they can while China sits back and watches. China has too much vested in us right now to, they're so heavily vested in our bonds and our manufacturing that it would not be in their interest to go up. But Russia is a different story, and so is Iran. And I really, really find that that's this whole, caliphate issue with Iran and the money they just received is a major thing that could show up in this astrology.
Is there
again?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. 219 is where I'm seeing it.
219. That's where you see that things are going to really be in a bad place.
Yeah, I do, right. And then I think we're going to get through it, however severe it ends up being, and we start a new era from 2020 forward, the end of 2020, the winter solstice. Even though that may not be any, skyrockets in the sky celebrating that, but I think it commences an era that is going to be amazing to live in. I think we're going to be they're going to put barcodes on everybody's forehead, or they're going to try and put chips in us. They already got them in the phones and the license, and the passports. But it's going to become a very high-tech little world, in my opinion.
All right, let's talk about something that's always very touchy, and as you said, you get angered, hated mail just because you're doing his charts. You're not weighing in on this. You're not giving your perspective. You're giving what the stars are telling you.
I'm just giving you what his chart says, yeah.
Right. Okay, so talk to us about our current commander-in-chief. Is there anything foreboding? I mean, you nailed the fact that he was going to take this presidency and he was going to do it handily. Do you see any issues with his presidency in the sense of assassination or being outed?
I do. I don't know that it's going to be successful. I think he has what we call a primary direction happening, and it perfects right in the middle of June of 2018, which is coming right up next year. If he gets through that, he's going to be fine. A lot of astrologers were just predicting Donald Trump has something called sati sate going on. That's a very strange term that's used in Vedic astrology, which means the 7.5-year period during which Saturn transits a person's moon. See, the moon in Vedic astrology is considered to be the astral body, or more the psychic mind, if you will. So Saturn, even though we know it's the ringed planet in astronomy, it represents that particular individual's collective karmas. And Trump just had, right before the hurricane, this whole thing that went on when Paul Manafort left, remember all that? And all this stuff happened, or not Paul Manafort, who's the other guy that who was just in there? Steve Bannon.
Oh, Bannon, right, okay.
Bannon. When Bannon left, Trump exactly had Saturn standing over the top of his moon. And that transit was for a very powerful time, for about a week and a half. And many people thought he was going to get impeached there. I personally don't think the owners are going to allow him to be impeached. There's a softening going on right now. And disasters always do that. They always unify the country, like these hurricanes and calamities always tend to bring people together. They rally behind the president. But more than that is going on with his chart. He's passing through something right now that's changing him. You know, Donald Trump, if you look at his Vedic chart, he fits it to the T. He was born on an eclipse. And that's why he's so brash and abrasive with people. And he also has Mars right on his ascendant in the Vedic chart, which he's pushy. He's really a pushy guy. But I have clients who know him really well, and I can't mention who they are. And I have people in government and in politics, and every single one of them have told me he's really a great guy. I mean, I really like him. In fact, today in the news, when he cut the deal with Schumer and Pelosi, just shows he's not a politician. This guy is like a general. When I looked at his chart, he's got the ruler of the ascendant, meaning his rising sign planet that rules him, is in the 10th house. Again, I get heat for this. I still stick behind what the chart says, and that is he's going to, like him or hate him, he's going to be a very effective president by the time he gets out of office. Very effective.
And again, this isn't you weighing in. This is what you're telling by the charts.
Yeah. If you slid this chart under my nose and said, "What do you think of this guy?" I'd go, "Wow, this is a guy. He may not be, super polished, but boy, he's somebody who gets something done." I mean, this is a powerhouse chart. He looks like the chart of an emperor or general, and he has exactly the chart he's got. He has the classic emperor's chart, and I think that's what offends so many people about him. Is he's very brash, but notice the change in Trump now. Trump has changed, and that's what astrology really shows. Gandhi had a wonderful saying. He said, God created time so everything wouldn't happen at once. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Trump has grown. I think he's seen things on the inside that he never expected to see. I'm not going to say things that I believe or have been told, but there's a lot of stuff going on that our government knows that they'll never expose to the people. And, of course, we hear about UFOs and all this stuff. But I think the owners have probably sat down with him and not only playing him that little video from 1963 where they gave a JFK haircut to a president, but also I think he's changed based on what just happened to him in his chart. Every time in my life that I've seen Sade Sate happen, and it can only happen 2 or 3 times in an individual's life because Saturn takes almost 28 and a half years to go around the chart. So depending on how old you are when it happens, you can't get more than 3 of them. You'd be 90 years old or older. So this is his second one, and I think this is changing this guy, and he's becoming much more careful what he says. Even though he's abrasive and he's arrogant, he's always going to be that way. I think he's been told to, and that's why you see, what was it? Who's that new general he just got in there, that chief of staff that he just brought in? I can't remember the name of him, but what was his name? Yeah,
I'm blanking on it as well.
Yeah, me too.
I'm so focused on the supernatural, right? The real world is a lot scarier to me than the stuff we talk about on this show. So I forget who all the real players are out in the world out there.
Yeah.
We need to take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about some of the other changes, some of the other points of interest you see, and things that people can look for themselves. Is this something that people can and will be able to understand without needing to go as deep as you have in this kind of training? We'll talk more about that in just a moment.
Folks, the NFL is back. My Minnesota Vikings are back. And even though I'm a diehard Minnesota Vikings fan, I got to tell you, I got to make it a little bit interesting this year. They didn't look too great in preseason. I'm a little worried about my Vikings this year. And there's only one way I'm going to make it interesting. I'm going to do that by going through BetDSI.com. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is this year. BetDSI.com has been in business for over 20 years, paying winners like me. I'm going to win this year. They're A+ rated on sportsbook review sites, and you can use your sports knowledge to make some extra cash with BetDSI.com. They're an easy-to-use mobile playing interface as well, right there on your phone or your mobile device. Play, win, get paid. It's as easy as that. BetDSI offers odds on everything football, including live betting and props as games are in action. And BetDSI even offers odds on pretty much everything else too, including major sports, politics, reality TV. That's right, folks, reality TV. Pretty much everything out there. Now I'm going to tell you something. Monday night, the New Orleans Saints come to town. Adrian Peterson says he'd like to stick it to my Minnesota Vikings. Here's an overpaid whiner who got paid for sitting on the sidelines with injuries, sitting on the sidelines for indiscretions, and we kept paying him and paying him and paying him. And he wants to stick it to us? I don't think so. So not only am I knowing that my Minnesota Vikings defense is going to stonewall him every chance they give him the football, but I'm going to put money on it with BetDSI.com. Take that, Adrian. Not only that, but Dalvin Cook's going to run all over New Orleans defense. I know that for sure. You want to get on the action too? Join me. Use the promo code Darkness25 and get $25 free wager just for registering. If you decide to deposit, you'll also get a 200% bonus match on your money. That's right, a 200% bonus match on your money. Now, I play there myself. I got in on the Mayweather-McGregor fight. I did some action on the Vikings preseason, and I recommend BetDSI if you want to add a little extra excitement to the games you're watching. Once again, get to BetDSI.com, use the promo code Darkness25 to get a free $25 wager on the house, and 200% extra bonus when you deposit. That's Darkness25 to get your free wager and start winning today.
All right, Jeff, you said that there's a lot of changes, a lot of transitions that are coming. One of the things that was kind of a trigger point in your press release was the fact of talking about the inevitability of the surveillance state. I mean, we've already basically come to that point. Thankfully, in some ways, it's really good because we're able to find these terrorists. We're able to find the evildoers a lot quicker than we have been in the past. Is this necessarily ushering in a new age of paranoia and 1984's George Orwell, or is this the transformation and this kind of gathering of people that will be a good thing?
Well, I just think it's going to become such a high-tech place that, everything. I mean, look at how our lives have changed just with iPhones and Androids and smartphones. It's amazing. I mean, it's absolutely astounding. I mean, I remember in the 60s, you roll up windows and black and white TV. I mean, it just, and I'm not that old. I mean, it takes my grandmother, who just died at 102. She did see horses and buggies go to, cell phones. Anyways, I think I do. I think we're going to find this to become an extremely high-tech world. The future has always been painted as this dark, ominous, surveillance state and all that. I think what the dangers are is if it gets abused. There's the danger. Is human nature has not changed in thousands and thousands of years. The technology has, but human nature basically remains the same. And we're all trying to get more conscious and more evolved. But I think if there's abuses of technology, it could be catastrophic. As long as it's kept into check, I think then it's okay. But I think we're on the brink of an explosion in technology beyond our wildest dreams.
Right, and anything can be twisted and made evil. But I'm wondering. I hear there's a company in Canada that is chipping their employees. I've been in contact with a couple of the employees trying to tell me about this. And I often think, as a parent, am I opposed to the idea of my children being chipped? If they can ping and GPS find my child, does that stop this sexual trafficking that's going on around the world with children? Does that start bringing people home quicker? Does that bring our servicemen and women home faster? In a devastating event like 9/11, are we able to find the pockets of living people quicker and more efficient and effective? And do the positives outweigh the negatives in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's not for me to judge. I can just say it's likely to happen.
All right.
We're moving in that direction, and there is a lot of value to it. I mean, I love, I'm a parent too, and I love being able to track my kid on his iPhone.
Right.
I do. When it's time for him to come home, I can see right where he's at.
Are we going to have some Garden of Eden months coming up? Some just peaceful, happy places where we're not feeling all this tension and aggression around the world and in our own country?
Yeah, I personally think too much fear it's always been this way. I mean, when you go back, I love researching ancient texts. I have so many old texts that I love to read. They've been marching them out to meet the Messiah for the last couple thousand years. And there's been more fear generated. And astrologers are to blame for that. Partially in psychics and all that, because they get work by predicting bad things. But one of the things I love, and that's probably one of the few reasons I keep doing this, is the joy I get in helping people to see when their good times are coming. Like when I do readings for people or people in companies, it's very pleasant to be able to say, hey, you got a great cycle that's about to commence right here. And they don't need to know astrology. I just send people a code right on my computer, and they log right into my screen, and you're watching a movie, and it's about you. You get to be the lead character. And it's real simple once you see what I'm pointing to. And you can see, like, oh, my God, for the first time in 12 years, Jupiter's going to hit your midheaven. What does that mean? Well, that means your career is going to really start taking off. Well, here's the power of intention. If you know that, you're going to take advantage and prepare much more so than if you don't know it's coming. It'll still come either way, but preparation, like the old saying goes, success is when opportunity meets preparedness, and it's very true. And the same goes for the so-called challenging times. I personally don't think there's anything that's really good or bad. It's how we react to it In fact, that was the philosophy of ancient astrologers, was to get the person to see the spiritual growth that was being displayed in the energy unfoldment in the chart. And that's powerful. I talk to people in psychology all the time, and we really have a wonderful time discussing how you can take bad times and actually maximize them and turn them into something that's really growing and positive. And it's true. You can. There's growth in everything. In fact, getting into the ancient symbolism of astrology, all astrology is derived from the circle of the sun, which is the infinity of creation, the crescent of the moon, which is the crucible and nurturing, just like a child stays in a mother's womb for 9 months approximately, or a seed in the ground in the earth, and the cross, which is the 4 elements of manifestation. And if anyone ever looks at all the ancient glyphs, meaning the icons in astrology, they're all derived from the sun and the moon and the cross. That's actually in biblical texts. So much has been lost, and again, I have great respect for certain religions. Other ones I don't, because they have dismantled so much sacred knowledge that ties all this together. It put astrology into the proper perspective. God is above astrology. So are you, and so am I. But what astrology is it's the lower vector forces. In fact, I believe it's the karmas we created. And now you broach into something totally different, and that is reincarnation. Is reincarnation possible? My opinion is absolutely 100%. I think that's what astrology is the ancient Vedantic charts. You're not looking at your birth chart. You're looking at a chart of when you came into this body and the cycles of karmic lessons that you're growing on. Modern society doesn't allow that kind of thinking. In fact, I think it was the 5th century was the Nicene Councils. You remember those, right?
Yeah.
The guys in Rome.
Yeah, I wasn't there, Jeff, but just because I'm going to be 50 doesn't mean I'm that old, Jeff, all right?
I know, I'm going to be 60 pretty soon. I know. I don't remember them either. But seriously, you probably have heard of them.
Right.
And they were the nice guys, the bearded guys, murdering each other to decide what Christians would believe for the next 1,500 years. And they decreed that reincarnation was not possible, or was not a part of the doctrine of Rome's church. Well, that's why we see Lutheranism and all the different sects of Christianity, baptism, on and on. And the Vedantic scriptures, the Egyptian, anything was the case. I mean, they wouldn't accept anything but reincarnation, is what I'm trying to say. And what's fascinating about an astrology called NADI, which is spelled or pronounced Nadi, it's all about reincarnation. It's looking at where is your soul. People often get amazed when I'm doing readings, and they'll say, well, how did you know my dad was this way or my mom was that way? Because it's in the chart. Well, it's just there. And I was astounded when I first started learning this from certain teachers. I'm like, how did you do that? He says, well, it's very simple. This is the signifactor of the home, and this is the signifactor of the parents and the siblings, if you have any. And it looks like it's predicting the future, but it's not. What it's showing, and I really say this solar system is a matrix, and Saturn seems to be when the soul escapes from Alcatraz. And in fact, the ancient Vedantic astrology has a mathematical calculation point called the Son of Saturn. And that seems to be an indication of when consciousness rises to a certain point, and that particular soul is coming what they would call into moksha, self-awareness. And every saint, every prophet, every avatar always promoted that, negate the physical world, realize you're a spiritual being incarnate in a body. And these texts get so amazingly close to illuminating that. It's really, I find, refreshing.
All right. I've got to ask you this question. I know if I don't, my fiance is going to crest me over the head. You talked about how Franklin said that, right, no good leader, no good man is going to do anything without checking the charts. Jeff, I turned 50 on November 22nd, and I think we're going to tie the knot on the same day. Is this a bad move for me? 11/22, the 50th birthday, the beginning of a new relationship and marriage, or should I wait until 2068 again? What do you think is better for me here?
Is this your first marriage?
But no. Okay. This will be magic number 3.
Oh, okay.
But the last marriage, so that's the good point.
Well, there you go. That's great. Well, electional astrology works and it's different for everything. Like filing a corporation, you use different techniques. In marriage charts, the eastern horizon, where you get pronounced, that planet ruling that, and the planet ruling the western horizon, which represents the bride or the groom respectively, have to be doing something nice in harmony. And this is an interesting area of research. I have done so many wedding elections over the years where I've had people say, hey, we want to get married at a good time. So this is not something I can just look at flippantly. It takes me time. What I do is I take the location where you're going to be pronounced. And speaking of religions, there are some religious practitioners who, if you tell them you're using astrology, they may not allow that. There are others who are just fine with it. So you have to be careful. But how wedding elections work is you find the right time, and then, of course, you make sure you have a facility and someone who can marry you. And then you time your vows, and you have yourself pronounced man and wife right at that astrological time. And I usually can find pretty good windows.
That doesn't sound too hard.
It's not that hard.
Getting it all down to timing, I guess that's radio, right? I should be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I had a guy in one of the studios here in town call me up a number of years ago. He said, Jeff, I forgot. He said, I'm going to get married. And he says, this is my second marriage. I don't want to do it again. He says, I already set the date. He said, what does this date look like? So I looked at it, and I said, I don't know. I said, I wouldn't do it on that date. It's not a good day. And he said, well, what am I going to do? We've already booked the hall. Everything's set, and everybody's coming, rabbis coming, everything. I said, well, here's what you're going to have to do. I said, go marry her. Before that, go file the marriage license, and then hold this one as just a celebration, and nobody will know the difference. So that's what he did. He ran down to the Pacific Ocean, got someone to marry him right at that perfect time, went to Beverly Hills, filed the certificate, and then when Uncle Fred and everybody flew in, and Aunt Myrma or whoever, they just held the big ceremony and did it again, but they were already married.
Interesting.
So what is this? What is this date again?
November 22nd.
All right, of this year.
Yes, 2017, right on my 50th birthday.
Well, that's great. 2017. Where at?
I can't say that on the air, Jeff. I'll have everybody showing up unannounced now.
Yeah.
It'll be in Minnesota.
Okay, yeah. Because that's what I'd have to do. See, in order to do this on air, you may not want me to do that because electional astrology is the most advanced type, but I'd be happy to look at it for you off air. And that way I can get all the particulars because it really comes down to where exactly you're doing it. It's longitude and latitude of the location, which the city is fine, and then the time. And you always want the moon to be doing something lovely too.
All right. Geez, now I've got some pressure. I gotta really work my way through this.
Well, no, it's my job to find that. It's real simple once I find it.
Very cool. Well, coming into the end here, Jeff, again, if people want charts, and I mean, I didn't realize that there are marriage astrological charts and there are, work astrological charts. Does it break down that specific for everything? So, that's what you're getting the best. It's not just like flipping open the newspaper is what you're saying in detailing this way.
Oh, God, no. No, this is very sophisticated stuff. And it's always good when I have the birth chart of the bride and the groom because I don't like to do things. Well, one of the things is very important. You don't want the eastern horizon to be your 6th, 8th, or 12th house. So electional astrology has a lot of criteria to it, a lot of rules, and that's stuff that, it's my job to do that, and I've got some really good tools here to do that with.
Isn't it? Now, you said you're your own skeptic when it comes to the astrology of things. Mm-hmm. Doesn't it seem funny that if two people found each other, what could mess up their whole future is the wrong day and the wrong time and the wrong moon and the wrong house or whatever? Doesn't that seem
but marriage
bizarre?
is a contract. Yeah,
right.
But marriage is a contract. See, that's a whole other world. And now you've entered into the mundane world of, okay, our assets are now tied. They're legally tied. If you have children or are going to have children, that's a big deal because now you have a relationship that's much more complex than just going out and meeting. And I find you don't use astrology for everything, but important things like filing corporations, things like getting married, buying a house. I can't tell you how many real estate elections I've done where people have said to me, I've had my house on the market for 6 months or a year, haven't had anybody, offer anything, or, it's been dead, or the realtor doesn't show it or whatever. And I say, well, when did you sign this? And I would look at it, and invariably it was a pretty lousy time. And again, there's a lot of rules to that. And I said, well, here's what you do. Take it off the market. I'll give you a good time to sign the contract with the new realtor, put the sign in the ground right at this time, and boom. They usually sell this thing, and the chart indicates that sometimes I say you'll sell it within, 3 months, or you'll sell it within 3 days, depending on the astrology I find. So you have to remember, we're at the effect of what's there. But I've had people sell houses. I had one individual, she said she sold that house more in 2 weeks than she had shown it in 3 years. And she sold it for more than she put it on the market for. And she sold it, I think, within 3 weeks. And it was on the market for 3 years.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, again, why I say I'm a skeptic is I'm not superstitious about it. I treat it as what it is. It's a science using the ancient astrology. And what I do is I will look at what the chart says and tell you that's what it says. And electional astrology is amazing because if you sign things at a good time, I've only had, over the last 30-something years, I don't think I've had but 2 people get married and get divorced. And both of those I had warned had really bad charts for marriage. See, now that's some cool stuff. You can see in Vedic astrology whether or not you have a chart that's really good for marriage. And here's the interesting thing. It's called Kuja dosha. It means martial affliction to the 7th house. It means you've got bad karma with relationships. And what I found is if you marry someone else with similar conditions, it helps cancel it. So, and it's in the old text. And marrying them, the 2 people who did get divorced are still best of friends. They didn't end up in some huge legal battle, and there are kids. They're still friends. They're amicable. Where I can't tell you how many people have had say to me, Jeff, what happened to my marriage? And I said, I don't know. When did you get married? And they would show me, and I would see a progression that was set up in that chart 2 years later or 5 years or whatever it was. And sure enough, they were in the Battle of the Bulge, scratching each other's eyes out with the law firms, trying to get all the assets they could, or doing horrible things in child custody cases and accusations.
Well, I'm sold, Jeff. I will be giving you both of our charts, the possible location and dates, because I want to this is my best friend. I want to make sure this one is the concrete one. So I'm willing to buy into this whole astrology aspect of it, and I've done it my way in the past. Didn't work so well, Jeff. So what's in the harm of trying something new, right?
Well, I get a lot of people that say that, and they find it does help. You can't live your life completely by astrology because we're responsible for our own actions, clearly. But what I like astrology is very much like a stop-and-go light. It tells you when energies are good. So if you're a good driver and you're blowing red lights, pretty soon you're probably going to have a problem, or Officer Friendly is going to decorate you with a ticket at least, right? And if you're a bad driver going through green lights, well, might not do so well either. So, it's incumbent upon us to be responsible for our actions and all that. But astrology really does show when energies are good, and I find it's been so accurate, it's creepy. Again, like I said, in 1975, I started driving. I got my license, and I had the girlfriends, and my mother was so accurate with that stuff. And I said, what are you doing? I said, there's no way you could have learned that by just meeting her. And she goes, oh, no, I got her chart. And I said, well, what did you do? And then she would look at her cycle.
Oh, no, I got her chart. Don't worry about it. Mommy's got your hand, yeah.
Yeah, Mommy's got your hand. And and we had fun. My mother passed in 1988. And in the early 80s, that's when I had my studio. I used to own a recording studio and production company, and it was a lot of fun. I met so many great people, and I would always look at the astrology of the various musicians that would come into the studios and, composers and so on and so forth. It was just amazing to see the diversity of everyone's energy, and it's always amazed me how accurate it is. When I got into the ancient stuff, though, that's when it really... That was the aha moment. It was like, okay, this is really sacred stuff. We're not looking at birth charts. We're looking at souls.
Fascinating stuff. Well, I can't wait to chat with you more. And as you get more and have more to reveal to us, Jeff, I hope you'll come back and join us again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to.
Well, that's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with a brand new edition of the best in paranormal talk radio, plus the return of Theater of the Mind right here on Beyond the Darkness.